If you bite me, that's okay. But you're not staying in this cage forever. That's what I said the first time I met Scout. He didn't flinch or growl. He just stared at me with eyes that had seen too much. Eyes that didn't trust anyone anymore. They called him Unadoptable. That word was in red on his kennel card at the Whispering Pines Animal Shelter, tucked just off a quiet road in rural Ohio. I was only 12 years old, but I knew a label like that meant Scout was running out of time. My name's Evan Fisher, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that sometimes people and animals just need one person to believe in them. I wasn't supposed to be at the shelter that day. Mom only stopped by to drop off some old blankets and towels. But I wandered in behind her, past the little welcome desk, and down the hallway lined with metal doors and barking voices. Most dogs pressed their noses to the gate, hopeful, but not Scout. He sat with his back to the door, rigid, ears twitching but otherwise motionless. He looked like a faded shadow in the corner. Brown fur tangled and patchy, ribs showing under his sides, and a scar that ran from his shoulder down to his elbow. A volunteer noticed me standing there and gave a sad smile. "That one's a tough case," she said. "He was picked up near the train tracks. Might have been out there for months. He doesn't let anyone near him." I nodded like I understood, but the truth is, I didn't. I didn't know what could make a dog stop believing in people. I had a yellow Labrador at home named Boomer. He wagged his tail even when I came home from school late. I couldn't imagine a dog giving up. But Scout had. You could feel it. He wasn't angry, he was just done. "Can I sit with him for a while?" I asked. The volunteer blinked. "You sure? He hasn't really let anyone in there. He'll just ignore you." "That's okay. I'll just sit." I wasn't trying to be a hero. I didn't even know what I was doing, honestly, but something about Scout made me want to sit on that cold concrete floor. So they unlocked the kennel, and I stepped inside. He didn't move. I sat down slowly, cross-legged, and leaned against the wall. No sudden movements. I pulled out the corner of a sandwich from my pocket, peanut butter and banana, my favorite, and placed it gently on the floor halfway between us. Then I started talking. Not about anything serious. Just things. Baseball. My friend Logan's terrible haircut. The weird math homework I didn't understand. My sister's obsession with sparkly notebooks. Scout didn't even look at me. But the next day, I came back. And the day after that, every afternoon for the next 2 weeks, my mom would take me back to Whispering Pines. I'd sit with Scout. He never barked, never growled, never came closer. Until the 13th day. I had just finished telling him about the time I fell off the monkey bars in 2nd grade when I heard the sound. A soft shuffle. I looked up. Scout had turned his head. Just slightly. One eye met mine, then dropped to the sandwich piece I'd laid out. Slowly, cautiously, he crawled forward on his belly, like a soldier sneaking through grass. He took the sandwich piece in his mouth, backed away, and sat down again. He didn't look up after that, but it was a start. I told the staff. They were surprised. One of the shelter ladies, Linda, gave me a soft pat on the back. "You're good with him," she said, "but we can't keep him here forever." I knew what she meant. The shelter had limited space. Dogs with aggression or fear issues were often moved to sanctuaries if they were lucky, but most weren't, and Scout had that red label, Unadoptable. I went home and told my parents I wanted to adopt him. Dad looked over his glasses at me like I had just asked for a pet tiger. "Evan, he's not like Boomer. That dog's got problems. You sure you can handle that?" "He just needs time," I said. Mom was quiet for a moment. Then she said, How about we foster him, just for a few weeks? See how he does." That next Friday, we brought Scout home. The shelter staff loaded him into our SUV, and I sat in the back with Boomer on one side and Scout in a crate on the other. Boomer tried to sniff at him, tail wagging, but Scout just watched quietly, not reacting. At home, we set up a space in the laundry room, calm, quiet, with a big bed and a food bowl. For the first few days, Scout stayed curled up in the corner. He didn't bark, didn't eat much, and definitely didn't wag his tail. Boomer would come by and drop toys next to him, then sit nearby like a fuzzy golden statue. Eventually, Scout began sniffing at the toys. Then one night, he took one into his bed. The first time he let me touch him was 2 weeks later. I was sitting beside him, reading out loud from a book, one of those adventure stories with a kid and a spaceship, and I felt a nudge on my hand. I looked down. Scout's nose had bumped into my palm. I didn't move at first, but when I gently placed my fingers on his head, he stayed still. His fur was coarse, but warm. His eyes closed for just a second. From then on, the progress was slow, but steady. He started eating normally. He let my sister, Maddie, give him a treat. He even followed Boomer outside once, then trotted back in when called. Not everything went smoothly. He still hated leashes, and loud sounds made him freeze. But each day, Scout became more dog and less shadow. Then came the school presentation. My teacher, Mr. Carlson, announced we'd be doing a project on change and growth. Most kids chose personal goals or sports they'd tried. I asked if I could talk about Scout. Mr. Carlson raised an eyebrow. "The foster dog?" "Yeah," I said. "He's changing a lot, and he's teaching me stuff too." So I put together a poster with photos. Scout curled in the corner at the shelter, then eating at home, then sitting next to Boomer. I added captions like Day 1, Scared, and Week 3, First Tail Wag. On the day of the presentations, my classmates gathered around my board. I talked about patience, about fear, about how Scout wasn't broken, just hurt. When I finished, it was quiet. Then one of the kids, Tyler, said, "He looks kinda cool now, not scary at all." I smiled. "He's just a regular dog now." Except he wasn't. He was still healing, still scared sometimes, but he had come so far. After that, people started asking about him. Neighbors who had been nervous started waving when we walked by. My aunt, who had always been skittish around big dogs, brought him a bag of treats. It was like the world had stopped seeing the label and started seeing him. A few months into the foster, the shelter called. Linda asked if we were ready to bring him back. I looked at Scout, lying with his head on Boomer's paw. He looked up, eyes steady. "He's already home," I said. My parents agreed. The adoption papers were signed that week. Scout was no longer unadoptable. He was just Scout, my dog, and that was only the beginning. The first time Scout barked, it nearly made my mom drop a glass. We were all in the kitchen, Saturday morning, the smell of pancakes thick in the air. Boomer was doing his usual dance near the table, tail swinging like a mop, while Maddie was trying to explain why syrup counted as a fruit serving. Then Scout, from his spot under the window, let out one loud, sharp bark. Just one. But it made everyone stop and stare. Then he did it again, just once more. "I guess he finally found his voice," Dad said, shaking his head with a smile. Scout looked around, almost surprised by the sound himself. Boomer trotted over and nudged him like he was saying, "Took you long enough." After that, the barks came now and then, short, soft ones when he was excited, or quiet growls when the doorbell rang. But never out of fear. Just communication. We started working more on the leash. Scout had this thing about being led. At first, he would freeze completely or try to slink away when the leash clipped on. It took weeks of just sitting on the porch with the leash lying beside us. I'd hold it, but I wouldn't clip it on. I'd let him sniff it, even chew on it a little. Then one day, without any fuss, he stepped forward and nudged my hand. I clipped it on. He didn't run. He just stood there. We took our first real walk a week later. Boomer was already ahead, wagging like crazy, and Scout walked beside me, stiff but focused. He didn't pull, didn't cower. He just walked. A neighbor waved as we passed, and I heard her say, "Is that the one from the shelter?" "Yeah," I called back. "This is Scout." He looked up at me when I said his name. He was starting to learn it. I started keeping a journal. My mom had given me a plain notebook when I started 6th grade, and I'd only filled 3 pages with school stuff. But now I filled it with Scout's milestones. Day 42. Scout took a treat from Dad's hand. Day 50. Played tug with Boomer for the first time. Day 61. Watched squirrels without trying to run. It was like watching someone learn how to be happy again. Not all at once, and not always in a straight line, but definitely moving forward. At school, people kept asking about him. I showed pictures on my phone. Scout laying across the couch with one paw hanging off, or curled up beside Boomer, their fur like opposite puzzle pieces. Some kids didn't believe he'd ever been aggressive. "He doesn't look mean," one of the boys said. "He wasn't mean," I told him. "He was scared. That's different." Mr. Carlson pulled me aside one day. "You've changed a lot since Scout came along," he said. "You seem more focused, more confident." I hadn't noticed it, but maybe it was true. When you help someone else heal, something happens inside you too. Then came the shelter event. Whispering Pines held an adoption fair every few months. Families could meet the dogs in a nearby park, ask questions, and fill out applications. Linda called and asked if we'd bring Scout, not for adoption, but as an example. A success story. "He doesn't like big crowds," I said. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" "We can put him near the quieter side," she said. "And we'll keep Boomer with him. Might help the others see what's possible." I talked to my parents. Dad said we could try it, as long as Scout seemed okay. So we prepared. I packed treats, water, toys, and his blanket. The morning of the event, Scout watched as I filled the bag, his tail giving a tiny swish. At the park, we set up a small fenced area with a canopy. Boomer flopped down like he owned the place, but Scout stood beside me, eyes scanning the crowd. His ears twitched every time someone clapped or laughed too loud, but he didn't bolt. A family stopped by. A boy around my age knelt down. "Hi, buddy," he said softly. Scout didn't move, but his head tilted. "He's not up for adoption," I said quickly. "He's just here to show what's possible." The boy smiled. "Cool. We're thinking about getting a dog. My little sister's too scared of big ones, but my mom says if we find a calm one, it might help." We talked for a few minutes. Scout eventually walked closer, sniffing the boy's hand. He didn't lick, but he didn't pull away either. That was the first time I realized that Scout could help others, not just me. After the fair, Linda told me that 3 dogs with fear issues had gotten applications. People had seen Scout and understood what time and love could do. Summer turned into fall. The leaves in our backyard turned gold and red, and Scout took to laying in the sun patches, head resting on fallen leaves. My journal had grown thick with updates, and we'd even started working on tricks. Boomer could do all the basics. Sit, shake, roll over. Scout wasn't interested at first, but after watching Boomer a dozen times, he slowly started trying. One day, I held up a treat and said, "Sit." He looked confused, so Boomer walked over, plopped down, and got a treat. Scout stared, then slowly lowered his haunches. His legs trembled a bit, but he made it. "Good boy," I said, giving him a treat. After that, he started sitting more often. He didn't always get it perfect, but he tried. And that was enough. Thanksgiving came, and with it, family. My grandparents drove in from Pennsylvania. They had always loved Boomer, but they were a little nervous about Scout. "He's the rescue, right?" Grandpa asked, eyeing him from across the living room. "Yeah," I said. "He's come a long way. You can pet him if you want." Grandpa knelt slowly, hand out. Scout looked at me, then walked over and sniffed. Then he sat. "Well, I'll be," Grandpa muttered. "He's a gentleman." Grandma gave him some turkey under the table. I'm not sure that was allowed, but Scout didn't mind. Then came the day I'll never forget. It was early December. Snow had started to fall, and school had been canceled. Maddie and I bundled up to take the dogs outside. Boomer bounded into the snow like a golden blur, but Scout hung back on the porch, unsure. "Come on, Scout," I said, holding out a snowball. "It's just cold fluff." He took a cautious step forward, then another. His paw hit the snow, and he stopped. I watched as he sniffed the air, then suddenly started hopping, lifting his paws high like he wasn't sure what was happening. Maddie laughed, and I tossed the snowball. Boomer chased it, barking. Scout watched, then darted forward, slipping and sliding a little. He didn't get the snowball, but he chased Boomer halfway across the yard. When they both stopped, panting, Scout let out the loudest, happiest bark I'd ever heard. That night, as I dried him off with a towel, he leaned into my leg. Not just standing near me, leaning, trusting. I looked at my parents. "I think he finally knows he's safe." Mom smiled. "I think he's known for a while." Scout had stopped sleeping in the laundry room months ago. Now he split his time between the living room rug and the end of my bed. He'd become part of the neighborhood, too. Kids waved. Neighbors said hi. Even Mr. Jenkins, who always walked his chihuahua like a secret agent on a mission, nodded at us during our morning walks. But not everything was perfect. One afternoon, a balloon popped at a birthday party next door. Scout bolted under the deck, shaking. It took nearly an hour for me to coax him out. Loud sounds still triggered something in him. Sudden movements made him flinch. Some things take longer to heal. We kept working on it. I researched ways to help dogs with anxiety. I even saved up my allowance to buy a special anxiety wrap for him. He didn't love it, but when we put it on during storms, he seemed calmer. As Christmas approached, our house filled with smells of cookies and pine. Maddie decorated Scout's collar with a tiny red bow. He tolerated it. Boomer wore reindeer antlers for exactly 9 seconds before shaking them off. On Christmas morning, Scout sat beside us as we opened gifts. He didn't bark. He didn't hide. He just watched, his tail thumping softly against the floor. I handed him a wrapped package. Inside was a squeaky toy shaped like a bone. He sniffed it, then gently took it in his mouth. That was his first toy he didn't just sniff or ignore. He actually squeaked it. Once, then again. Then he trotted off with it to his bed. I looked at him, curled up with the toy between his paws, and whispered, Not unadoptable. Never was. But this wasn't the end of Scout's story. Not even close. Something was about to happen that none of us expected. And it all started with a phone call one cold morning in January. When the phone rang that morning, it was early enough that the sun hadn't broken through the trees yet. Dad answered with a groggy, "Hello?" while Scout and Boomer slept at the foot of my bed. I could hear his voice carry from the hallway, low and confused at first, then alert. I sat up, rubbing my eyes. "Evan," he called. "You might want to come downstairs." I didn't know what to expect. My brain went to weird places. School closing again? Someone in the family sick? But when I got to the kitchen, Dad handed me the cordless phone. "It's Linda, from the shelter." "Hi, Linda," I said, still half asleep. "Hey, Evan. Sorry to call this early, but something's come up. It's about Scout." I felt a jolt in my stomach. "What about him? Is something wrong?" No, she said quickly. "Nothing bad. Just someone came by the shelter. A man. He saw the poster we still had up, the one from the adoption fair, and he recognized Scout. He said he might have been his dog before." My legs felt a little unsteady. I sat down. "He wants to talk to you," Linda continued. "To explain. He said he'd understand if it's too late, but he wants to meet Scout." "He abandoned him," I said quietly. There was a pause. "That's what I thought too," Linda admitted. "But Evan, this guy was crying, and he had pictures. Scout before. A pup. He showed me one of him with a goofy bandana and a chew toy in his mouth. Same scar on the leg." I didn't say anything. My hands were cold. "I'm not telling you what to do," Linda said. "You don't have to agree to anything. But maybe just hear him out?" I told him I'd talk to you and your parents. After I hung up, Dad and I sat there for a while. He didn't rush me. "You want to meet him?" he asked. "I don't know," I said. Boomer came into the room, tail wagging like always. Scout followed, quieter. He walked over and laid his head on my knee. I stroked behind his ears. "He doesn't remember his old life," I said. "Why should we bring it back?" "Maybe it's not about remembering," Dad said. "Maybe it's about healing." Mom came in later and agreed we should at least meet the man. In a neutral place. Just to listen. So we picked the park where the adoption fair had been. Linda agreed to be there too. The man's name was Ray. He looked like he worked with his hands. Calloused fingers, faded jeans, boots covered in dirt. He had kind eyes, though, and when he saw Scout, he froze. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Buddy." Scout didn't react at first. He stood beside me, alert but not tense. Then he sniffed the air. Ray knelt down, carefully. "Hey, it's me. Remember? We used to go hiking out past the reservoir. You loved chasing crickets." Scout tilted his head. Ray reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a photo. He handed it to me. It was a picture of Scout as a puppy, sitting in a camping chair, tongue hanging out, ears too big for his head. "His name was Rusty back then," Ray said. "I rescued him from a ditch behind a gas station. He was barely weaned." "What happened?" I asked. Ray looked down, swallowing hard. "My wife passed away 3 years ago. Cancer. I lost my job a few months later. I tried to hold on, but I lost the house. We were living out of a truck. One night I left Rusty with a friend while I tried to line up a work lead. When I came back, he was gone. The guy said Rusty got loose, ran off. I searched for weeks. I never found him." Scout took a slow step forward, then another. Ray stayed still. Finally, Scout sniffed his hand, then turned and walked back to me. "He doesn't remember," I said. Or maybe he does, but he's not ready, Ray replied quietly. I'm glad he's okay. That he found you. I wanted to be mad. For all the nights Scout had trembled under the bed, for the weeks of fear and hunger he must have endured. But looking at Ray, I didn't see someone who gave up. I saw someone who'd lost everything. We didn't invite him to take Scout back. That wasn't even on the table. But we did agree to meet again, just to let Ray spend time with him. A walk, maybe. No pressure. Over the next few weeks, Ray visited twice. Once at the park, once in our backyard. Each time, Scout was cautious but calm, and Ray never pushed. He brought treats, threw tennis balls, and talked to him the same way I had that first week, like he was just talking to a friend. By the third visit, Scout licked his hand. Just once. But it was enough. Meanwhile, life kept going. School was getting harder, and I started working with Mom at the local feed store on weekends to save up for a new bike. Boomer turned 7, and we threw a party. Scout even wore a paper hat for 3 whole minutes. One afternoon I came home and found Maddie sitting cross-legged on the living room rug, reading out loud to Scout from a fairy tale book. He had his head on her lap. She glanced up. "He likes this part," she whispered. He looked peaceful. A few days later, something unexpected happened. Our neighbor Mrs. Jarvis knocked on the door holding a flyer. "They're doing a therapy dog program downtown," she said. "Your Scout, he's got something special. I think he'd be good." I stared at the flyer. It was for a new program that trained dogs to visit nursing homes, libraries, and hospitals. Not every dog made it through. They had to pass behavior tests, stay calm in unpredictable situations, and get along with all kinds of people. Scout wasn't perfect. He still got scared sometimes. But the idea of him helping others the way he'd helped me, it stuck with me. "Can we try?" I asked my parents. They were hesitant at first, but we decided to sign up. The training started in April. We had 3 months. I made a schedule. Daily walks in new places. Practice sessions with strangers, mostly patient neighbors and family. I set up obstacle courses in the backyard. Pillows, cones, noises from my phone. We worked on commands, staying calm, being friendly. Boomer helped too. Scout watched him like a coach watching game tape. If Boomer could do it, Scout would at least try. At the first training session, we were both nervous. There were 10 dogs in the class. Some barked like crazy. One peed on the floor. Scout sat beside me, tense but quiet. The trainer, a tall woman named Karen, gave us a checklist. I held my breath as Scout went through each challenge, walking past another dog, ignoring loud noises, staying seated while someone clapped. He passed. Not with flying colors, but he passed. Each week, we went back. Each week, he got better. By the end of the course, Karen gave me a certificate. "Scout's not the fastest learner," she said, "but he's one of the most determined. And loyal. You've done good work, Evan." Our first visit as a therapy team was at a small nursing home. I was nervous, palms sweaty. Scout could sense it and pressed closer to my leg as we walked in. The residents lit up when they saw him. A man named George told me he used to breed shepherds in his younger years. He scratched behind Scout's ears and said, "He's got an old soul." Scout let 2 different women pet his back. He even laid down near a wheelchair without flinching. One lady called him her little lion. When we left, Karen handed me a sheet of feedback. The staff had written glowing comments. One said, "This dog made my day." I showed Scout the paper. "You made someone's day," I told him. He wagged. That night, I added it to my journal. Day 198. Official therapy dog. Helped 3 people smile. Sometimes I wondered what Scout would be like if none of the bad stuff had happened. If Ray had never lost him. If he'd grown up in a quiet house, with a soft bed and daily treats. But then I looked at who he was now, not in spite of his past, but because of it. Stronger, wiser, kinder. And this was just the beginning of where he'd go next. Scout had only been a therapy dog for a few weeks when something happened that changed everything again. Not in a bad way, but in a way that made me realize how much one dog could mean to so many different people. It started with a visit to the elementary school across town. Karen had called to ask if we could fill in for another therapy dog team that had canceled last minute. "They're doing a reading day," she said. "Kindergarten through 3rd grade. Mostly sitting on mats and letting the kids read to the dogs. Low-key stuff." Scout could handle that. So we packed up the car, his mat, his favorite quiet squeaky toy, a bag of treats, and drove over after school. The kids were already in a circle when we arrived. Teachers introduced us, and Scout lay down on his mat, paws crossed like a proper gentleman. A girl named Lily sat in front of him with a picture book and started reading aloud about a bear who got lost in the woods. Her voice was small and unsure at first, but Scout didn't move. He just watched her, ears perked. By the time she reached the 2nd page, her voice had grown stronger. She looked up now and then to see if Scout was still listening. He always was. Other kids took turns. One boy held out a book with rocket ships and made explosion sounds between words. Another sat so close to Scout that their shoulders touched. Scout didn't even blink. Then a teacher came over with a boy who hadn't joined the group. His name was Caleb, and he looked nervous, holding a book so tightly it was bending in the middle. "Caleb's shy," the teacher said quietly. "He hasn't spoken in class yet this year." I nodded and scooted aside so Caleb could sit near Scout. He didn't say anything, just sat there, looking down at the book in his lap. I gave him time. Scout yawned and rested his head on his paws, totally relaxed. After a few minutes, Caleb opened the book. His lips moved silently. Then, so softly I almost missed it, he said the first line. I didn't interrupt, didn't even look at him directly, just let it happen. By the 3rd page, his voice was clear. Afterward, the teacher had tears in her eyes. "He read out loud," she whispered. "That's the first time." Scout didn't know what he'd done. He just stretched, stood up, and let Caleb scratch his back. We kept getting requests after that. Libraries, clinics, a special needs class that met twice a week. Scout didn't love crowds, but he handled small groups just fine. We stuck to what worked. One Sunday, I sat at the kitchen table updating Scout's therapy dog log when Mom walked in with an envelope in her hand. "This came for you," she said, setting it down. I opened it and pulled out a letter on thick cream paper. At the top was a logo for the Ohio Pet Wellness Foundation. They were organizing a conference on animal therapy and community impact. They wanted us to come as speakers. I read the letter twice. "Me?" I asked. "Well, you and Scout," Mom said, smiling. "You've built something. People are noticing." The conference was in Dayton, 2 hours away. Dad offered to drive. I spent the next week putting together a short presentation, photos, milestones, Scout's journey from the shelter to our home. I included Caleb's story with permission. When we arrived, I saw more therapy teams than I'd ever imagined. Dogs of every size, tiny ones that fit in handbags, huge ones with paws the size of baseball mitts. Scout watched them all calmly. Our turn came after lunch. I stood on a stage with Scout lying beside me. The room wasn't huge, but it was packed. Volunteers, professionals, even a few vets in uniform. I took a deep breath. This is Scout. When I first met him, they called him Unadoptable. He was scared of everyone and everything. He wouldn't eat, wouldn't play, wouldn't let anyone near him. He'd given up. But I sat with him. I talked to him. I told him about my day. I brought him sandwiches. He didn't talk back, but he listened. And over time, he changed. I clicked the remote. Photos appeared. Scout in the shelter. Scout curled up on his bed. Scout playing in the snow. I thought I was helping him. But he helped me too. He taught me patience. And now he's helping others. I shared the story of Caleb. Of George at the nursing home. Of how Scout had become more than just a rescued dog. He was a rescuer in his own right. People clapped. A few stood. Afterward, a woman in a wheelchair rolled up to us with her granddaughter. "I had a dog like him once," she said. "Quiet but wise. You've done something special." I looked at Scout. He was licking peanut butter off his nose, totally oblivious. "He did most of it," I said. When we got home, the shelter had left a message. They were organizing a new outreach program for at-risk youth. They wanted Scout and me to be the first dog and handler team. Once a month, we'd visit a center where teens came for mentoring and support. Some of them had been through tough things: homelessness, run-ins with the law, family trouble. I was nervous. Scout picked up on it. He stuck close to me that first day, eyes tracking every movement in the room. The kids didn't rush over like the ones in the school. They hung back, quiet, arms crossed. So I sat on the floor with Scout. "This is Scout," I said. "He used to live on the street. People thought he was mean, dangerous, not worth saving, but someone gave him a second chance." The kids watched. One girl with a hoodie pulled up, asked, "He bite anyone?" "Not once," I said. "He didn't need to. He just needed someone to sit beside him." That day, we didn't do much more, just sat. Scout let them approach on their own time. One boy tossed a ball. Scout brought it back and dropped it near him. That was enough. Each visit got easier. The kids started talking, not just to me, but to each other. One drew Scout in his sketch pad. Another asked if dogs could feel lonely. "Definitely," I said. I saw myself in them sometimes. I hadn't been through what they had, but I knew what it felt like to be quiet, to feel like no one was really listening. Scout listened. Always. Back home, things stayed steady. Boomer started slowing down a bit. He didn't jump on the couch as fast, and he slept more. We took him to the vet, who said it was just age. 7, going on 8. Still healthy. Scout, meanwhile, seemed energized by the new routine. More alert, more engaged. He still had his off days. A dropped pan in the kitchen would make him flinch, and sometimes loud trucks on our walks made him freeze. But he bounced back faster. We tried new things. A local bookstore invited us for a weekend event. A radio station wanted to interview us. I said yes to most of it, but we always made sure Scout had downtime. His piece came first. I kept journaling. Pages turned into volumes. Day 245. First visit to youth center. Day 280. Caleb's mom sent a thank you card. Scout sniffed it. Day 300. Scout met a baby. Licked its foot. Baby giggled. One day, I found Maddie reading from my first journal. "You kept everything," she said. "Every little moment." "They weren't little to me," I said. She nodded. "Can I make a scrapbook? Like with pictures?" Together we started printing photos, cutting pages, pasting them in with captions. We made 2 copies, one for us, one to donate to the shelter. Linda cried when she saw it. "He's the heart of this place now," she said. "People come in asking, "Do you have any more dogs like Scout?" I laughed. "Every dog has a Scout inside them. They just need time." We even made a wall display at the shelter with Scout's story. His kennel card, the red Unadoptable label crossed out in marker, next to a photo of him wearing his therapy vest. Ray came to see it. He didn't say much, just stood there for a long time. Then he looked at me. "I can never thank you enough," he said. I didn't need thanks. Just seeing Scout, alive, thriving, loved, was everything. But we weren't done. Not even close. Something else was brewing, something that would take us further than we'd ever gone before. And neither of us was ready for what came next. It started with a message left on our answering machine, the kind you could barely hear because the caller spoke too fast, and our ancient phone cut off the end. Mom hit rewind 3 times before we could make out all the words. "Hi, this is Sarah Mallory. I'm with Midwest Pet Channel. We saw Scout's story in the Dayton presentation footage and on the Ohio Pet Wellness site. Would love to speak with Evan and family about a possible segment. My number is..." Then it cut off. Boomer barked at the phone like he always did when it beeped. Scout just tilted his head, probably wondering what all the rewinding was about. Mom looked at me. "Midwest Pet Channel? That's real?" "Yeah," I said slowly. "They're on Saturday mornings. They do adoption specials and animal heroes. Stuff like that." She rewound again and scribbled down the number. I wasn't sure what to think. I mean, Scout was just our dog. A really good dog. A life changer, sure. But being on TV? That felt like something for show dogs or stunt animals, not a shaggy rescue with a scar and a slow gait. Still, we called. Sarah answered on the second ring. She had a warm voice and talked fast, but it was clear she meant what she said. "We don't do this kind of feature often," she explained. "But your presentation made the rounds. One of our producers showed it to the network. We think Scout's story could inspire people, especially kids. We'd come to you, film at home, maybe follow you on a therapy visit. Nothing scripted, just real life." We talked as a family that night. Dad was hesitant, especially about having cameras around. Maddie was all for it, bouncing in her seat. Mom asked smart questions about filming dates and privacy. "Scout?" He just sighed and sprawled across the kitchen floor, like always. In the end, we agreed. The crew came 2 weeks later. 3 people. 1 camera operator, 1 sound guy, and Sarah herself. They arrived in a van filled with equipment, lights, cables, boxes of granola bars, and dog treats. Scout watched them set up with mild suspicion. When the boom mic came too close, he barked once, then walked away and laid down under the table. "We'll keep it quiet," Sarah promised. "Just want to capture his world. No pressure." They filmed for 2 days, our backyard, me and Scout walking through the park, a visit to the youth center, with permission from the staff. They even came to the shelter and filmed the old kennel with Scout's crossed-out red card. Sarah asked me to read from my journal. I chose a few entries. One about the first time Scout played fetch, another about the day he let Maddie hug him. They asked Dad what it was like watching Scout change. He answered carefully, voice low and proud. "We got lucky," he said. "Not just with the dog, with Evan too." Scout mostly ignored the fuss, but one morning he surprised everyone by jumping onto the couch beside me during an interview segment, resting his head on my leg like he knew it mattered. When the segment aired 3 weeks later, we watched it together in the living room. Boomer barked at the TV. Maddie clapped. Mom cried quietly. Dad patted my shoulder. The phones didn't stop ringing after that. People wrote letters, emails. A school in Kansas sent drawings of Scout done by 3rd graders. A man in Montana said Scout reminded him of a dog he'd had during his recovery from addiction. A woman in Vermont wrote, "I was going to give up on my rescue pup. Then I watched Scout. I think I'll give her another try." The shelter got an increase in adoption applications. Linda called to say they were thinking about starting a new foster program inspired by Scout's journey. "We'll call it the Second Shot Circle," she said, "because every dog deserves one." The local paper did a follow-up. They called me the kid who changed an unchangeable dog. That made me laugh, because Scout had changed me just as much. Then the invitation came. The National Youth Animal Alliance was holding its annual conference in Chicago. They wanted Scout and me to speak, not just attend, speak, a 30-minute slot during their key panel on youth-led animal advocacy. Chicago. That was big. We'd never been out of Ohio as a family. And 30 minutes? That was more than just a quick talk. We debated for 2 days. Maddie wanted to go just to see the city. Dad was nervous again. Cameras are one thing. A stage in front of strangers is another. But I wanted to go, not for fame or attention, just because I knew there were kids like me, quiet ones who needed a purpose, and dogs like Scout waiting for someone to see them. So we went. The drive was long, full of snacks and music and Scout's steady breathing in the back seat. Boomer stayed with Grandma. The hotel had dog-friendly rooms. Scout trotted through the lobby like he owned the place, tail up, ears forward. The conference was huge. Hundreds of people, booths, speakers, therapy dogs in vests everywhere. Scout got more attention than a celebrity. People came up to take photos, share stories, ask advice. The morning of our talk, I didn't eat much. Too nervous. But Scout seemed calm, like he trusted me to handle it. I stepped onto the stage, hands shaking. Scout walked beside me, leash loose, head high. Then I started. "I'm Evan Fisher. This is Scout. He was labeled unadoptable. I was just a kid who wandered into a shelter, and together we figured out how to change a life. Maybe 2. I spoke for 28 minutes, told the story, showed clips, shared journal entries, described the youth center visits, the reading days, the people Scout had helped. At the end, I said, every dog has something worth saving. You just have to sit with them long enough to see it. The applause was loud. Some people stood. Afterward, a girl with glasses and a freckled face came up. "I'm starting a reading group for shelter kids. Can I name it after Scout?" "Of course," I said. She handed me a handmade patch that said, Scout Circle. We stayed another day to attend workshops. I took notes. Scout got belly rubs. On the way home, we stopped at a rest area and sat in the grass. I looked at him and said, "You're not just my dog anymore. You're everyone's now." He blinked slowly and rolled onto his back. Back in Ohio, things settled. School was ending soon. Maddie was preparing for her 4th grade talent show. Boomer was limping a little now, but still cheerful. Scout kept up his therapy visits, and we started mentoring another student who wanted to become a therapy dog handler. Linda asked if we'd be part of a new shelter program, helping scared dogs socialize before adoption. Scout would be the anchor dog, the calm presence who showed them how to be brave. Our first pairing was with a wiry terrier mix named Tank. He barked at everyone, refused to eat unless no one was watching, and cowered in corners. Sound familiar? Scout didn't do anything fancy, just existed near him, laid down, napped, walked past without looking. After 3 visits, Tank followed him out into the yard. After 5, he sat near me and took a treat. After 8, he let Maddie pet his back. "He's doing what you did," I told Scout. "He's sitting beside the scared ones now. One day, I found Maddie writing in her own notebook. "What's that?" I asked. "Scout stories," she said. "For kids. I want them to know even scared dogs can be heroes." Scout curled up next to her, like he knew. We didn't know it yet, but something else was coming. A challenge that would test everything we'd built together. But Scout had already taught me how to face fear, with stillness, patience, and love. And we were ready. The first sign that something was off with Boomer was subtle. He didn't get up to follow me to the door when I grabbed my backpack like he always did. He lifted his head, thumped his tail once, then laid it back down. I didn't think much of it at first. He was older, sure. Maybe just tired. But then he skipped breakfast. Boomer never skipped breakfast. Scout noticed before I did. He stood over Boomer's bed that morning, nose twitching, tail still. He gave a soft whine, then turned to look at me. I knelt down and felt Boomer's ears. Cool. His breathing was steady but shallow. We took him to the vet that afternoon. The exam room was quiet. The vet, Dr. Weiss, had known Boomer since he was a puppy. She was gentle, kind, careful with her words. "It's his liver," she said finally, "and possibly something else. At his age, it could progress quickly. We'll do some tests to be sure." We left him there overnight for observation. That evening, the house felt wrong. Too quiet. Scout paced a little, then lay down by the front door. He didn't move from that spot for hours. Maddie cried quietly in her room. Mom tried to make dinner, but nobody ate much. I sat at the kitchen table, flipping through my journal. Pages and pages of Scout's growth. But Boomer was in there too. Always in the background, always steady. He was never the star of the story, but he'd been part of it from the start. Scout finally got up and nudged my hand. I looked at him, his brown eyes steady. "You miss him too, huh?" I whispered. The next morning, we got the call. The scans showed a mass in Boomer's abdomen. Surgery might buy him a little time, but not much. It wouldn't be painless. Dr. Weiss said we should prepare for goodbye. I didn't know how to do that. We picked him up that afternoon. He wagged when he saw us. Weak, but still him. Scout stayed close, pressing his nose into Boomer's side in the car. Over the next week, we made everything about Boomer. Extra walks, slow and gentle. Chicken and rice. Couch time, even though Dad had always insisted dogs stay off the furniture. Maddie slept on a sleeping bag beside him one night. Scout did too. He didn't play, didn't fetch. He just stayed. Boomer passed away on a sunny morning, lying in his bed with his family around him. Scout didn't make a sound. He sniffed Boomer's head, then sat beside the empty bed for a long time. We buried Boomer under the tree near the back fence, the same one he used to dig under as a puppy. Maddie painted a rock with his name and a paw print. I added, "Best boy always." Scout didn't eat for a day. Then, slowly, he returned to routine. But something had shifted. He was quieter, more still. When we went on visits, he didn't wag as much. He still helped, still listened. But the spark dulled a little. It took time. One day, a girl at the shelter asked, "Where's the other dog?" "Boomer passed away," I said. "Oh," she paused. "Scout seems sad." "He is," I said. "Dogs feel things. Maybe not like us, but they feel them." It was the first time Scout wasn't the one being helped. He was the one hurting. That changed something in me. I started talking more during our visits, not just about Scout's past, but about grief, about loss. I found that people opened up when I did. One kid said, "I lost my grandma last year. Nobody talks about her now. But I still miss her every day." Scout lay down beside him, head resting gently on the kid's shoe. At home, we kept Boomer's bowl. His collar hung by the back door, not to make ourselves sad, but to remember. Scout sniffed them sometimes. Then he'd walk away, tail low but steady. Spring came, bringing rain and new shoots in the garden. The shelter launched its second shot circle program officially, and Scout helped train 3 dogs in the first round. He moved slower but surer, like he understood what it meant to start over. One of the dogs, a beagle mix named Holly, had a nervous habit of pacing in circles. Scout would lie down and wait. Eventually she'd stop, look at him, and settle beside him. "He's like a furry counselor," one of the volunteers joked. Ray stopped by with an old photo he'd found in a shoebox. Scout as a puppy, flopped across a pillow with a rubber duck on his head. "He always had that look," Ray said, "like he was watching the world and keeping its secrets." Scout sniffed the photo, then sneezed and licked Ray's hand. Maddie finished her Scout scrapbook and gave a copy to the library. They made a little display in the children's section. Scout, the dog who listened. We got a thank you note from a family whose child had started talking more after meeting Scout. Another from a woman in a wheelchair who said Scout made her feel seen for the first time in years. And then another letter arrived. This one wasn't about Scout, not directly. It was from a school in rural Kentucky. Their small animal rescue program was struggling. Funding was being cut. Staff was short. They'd seen the Midwest Pet Channel segment and wondered, would we visit? Just once. No speeches, no fanfare. Just Scout and me. We talked it over as a family. Dad said, "If it feels right, we'll make it work." So we went. It was a long drive. The school was small, with cracked sidewalks and a crooked flagpole. The principal greeted us with coffee and a tired smile. "The kids don't have much," she said, "but they care. They've built this little shelter out of scrap wood and donations. Most of the animals come from the highway or abandoned homes." We met the students, a mix of middle and high schoolers. They showed us their kennels, clean but sparse. Their dogs were jumpy, underfed, wide-eyed. But the kids knew every name, every story. I told them about Scout, about Boomer, about what one person, or one dog, can mean. Scout walked quietly through the shelter, sniffing each gate. One dog barked non-stop. Another backed into the corner. Scout didn't react. He just kept moving. Then he stopped in front of a mutt with crooked ears and a missing toe. They just looked at each other for a long time. "This one doesn't let anyone near him," a student said. Scout sat. The mutt crept forward. The students stared. "You think maybe," one of them said, "Scout could stay a while?" We couldn't leave him, of course, but we stayed for 3 days, helped with feeding, built new beds, talked to the board, and when we left, they had a grant application in motion and a plan for a new outreach program, Scout's Circle. On the ride home, Scout curled in the back seat, head resting on my backpack. "I think Boomer would have been proud of you," I said. Scout blinked and wagged once. Back in Ohio, Linda met us at the shelter door. She had a surprise. A new pup had just come in. Scared. Silent. Mutt. Big eyes, long legs, shaggy like Scout had been. "He doesn't let anyone near him," she said. "Not even for food." I looked at Scout. "Want to meet him?" Scout walked over. Slowly. No rush. He sat outside the kennel and waited. The new dog looked up. Then, just barely, his tail moved. We stayed there a long time. We named him Timber. It started as a joke. Linda had mentioned the new pup kept knocking over his water bowl and bumping into things like a little wrecking ball. Maddie laughed and said, "Like a falling tree. Timber." And just like that, the name stuck. Timber was a mess. All long limbs and tangled fur, always watching but never stepping forward. He didn't bark. He barely ate. And he flinched if you moved too fast or reached too high. No one knew exactly where he came from. Someone had tied him to a park bench during a thunderstorm. A jogger found him trembling and soaking wet. He didn't even resist when they picked him up. Scout saw him on his first day. They stared at each other through the kennel bars, and something passed between them. Not a greeting, not curiosity. Something deeper. Recognition. That week, we started visiting Timber every afternoon. Scout would sit just outside the gate while I talked. At first, Timber stayed curled in the back corner. Then one day, he crept forward, inch by inch, until his nose touched the bars. Scout didn't move, just blinked slowly, like he was saying, "It's okay. Take your time." By the end of the week, Timber would wag, barely, but it was there. The shelter agreed to let us foster him. Bringing him home was like moving a ghost. He didn't resist the leash, but he didn't walk with it either. I ended up carrying him to the car. He lay curled in the back seat, unmoving the entire ride. At home, we set up the old laundry room again. Soft blankets. Quiet. Safe. Scout stayed near him most of the time, either in the doorway or curled nearby. He didn't crowd him. Didn't rush. Just stayed. Timber didn't eat the first night. Or the second. But on the third night, I walked past the laundry room and heard the soft sound of crunching kibble. I peeked in. He froze for a second, then kept eating. Progress was slow. Slower than Scout's had been. Timber had these moments where he'd suddenly freeze, stare at nothing, and tremble. We didn't know what triggered it, sometimes a door closing, sometimes nothing at all. But Scout was patient. And gradually, Timber learned. He learned that the sound of food hitting the bowl didn't mean danger, that the leash didn't pull or hurt, that hands could be gentle, that quiet didn't mean alone. The first time he barked, it scared him. He barked at a squirrel outside the window, then jumped backward like he'd surprised himself. Scout trotted over, tail wagging, like he was saying, "You're getting it." By the second week, Timber would come out of the laundry room. By the third, he'd rest beside Scout during movie nights. By the fifth, he joined us for a therapy visit. Just watching, not interacting. That visit changed everything. It was a regular stop at the youth center. The kids had heard about Timber, seen pictures. They were curious, but careful. No one pushed. One boy, Gabe, just sat on the floor and waited. Timber crept forward eventually, sniffed his shoe, and sat. Gabe didn't move. "I get that," he said softly. "Sometimes I don't want to be touched either." Scout lay down next to them both, like the glue holding everything together. The director at the center asked if Timber could keep coming. "Even if he's not official yet," she said, "he's showing the kids something real, that healing takes time, and it doesn't have to be loud." We kept bringing him. Meanwhile, the shelter's second shot circle expanded. They added a program for first-time foster families, using Scout's story as an introduction. We helped lead a session for a group of middle schoolers and their parents. Some were unsure. Some had never owned a pet. But by the end of the afternoon, one boy had signed up to foster a senior beagle. The reach kept growing. One weekend, we were invited to an adoption festival 2 towns over. A small rescue group was setting up and asked if Scout could be the guest of honor. It felt funny. Scout didn't care about honor. He cared about soft grass and liver treats. But we agreed. We set up a small booth with photos, books, a few Scout circle patches Maddie had made. Timber came too, this time as a silent sidekick. Dozens of people stopped by. Some remembered Scout from the Midwest Pet Channel. Others just liked the look in his eyes. A calm you could feel, even from across the field. One woman crouched near Timber. "He reminds me of my last dog," she said. "Took me a year to get her to stop hiding under the bed. Worth every second." Timber let her pet his head. That afternoon, 5 dogs got adopted. 3 families signed up for fostering. On the way home, I looked at Scout and said, "You're building something big. You know that?" He wagged. Just once, Timber kept growing, not just in confidence but in personality. He started stealing socks, hiding them in weird places, under couch cushions, behind flower pots, once even inside Dad's work boot. Maddie said, "He's a weirdo. I love him." One morning, we woke up to find Timber curled at the foot of my bed. He'd snuck in during the night. Scout was already there, stretched out like a king. They looked at each other and sighed like old friends. Summer came. School ended. I got a part-time job walking dogs for our neighbors. Maddie joined a summer reading club. We took Scout and Timber on short road trips, nearby parks, lakes, dog-friendly shops. Timber still had limits. Crowds overwhelmed him. Loud noises still made him tremble. But he had anchors now. He had Scout. At one visit to the library, a kid asked, "Will Timber be a therapy dog too?" I looked at him, sprawled across the reading rug, letting 3 kids draw rainbows on his back with washable markers. "He already is," I said. Linda agreed. A month later, Timber got his therapy dog vest. We didn't have a ceremony or anything flashy, just a walk through the park, his new tag clinking beside Scout's. Maddie snapped a photo. I printed it and taped it in my journal. Day 484. Scout taught Timber how to trust. Timber taught all of us how to wait. Then came a letter that surprised us more than any other. It was from a teacher in California. She ran a program for teens in juvenile detention. She'd seen a clip of our conference talk and read about the Second Shot Circle online. They had animals at the facility, mostly goats and chickens, but she wanted to try something new. "Would you be willing to consult with us? Maybe help us start our own version of your program?" I wrote back right away. Not just yes, but a full page of ideas. She responded with a full page of her own. Over the next few weeks, we built something. Scout wasn't there physically, but his story traveled. They made bracelets with his name. One boy wrote a poem. "A dog named Scout taught me how to stay." We laminated it and hung it in our hallway. Timber kept improving. Slowly. Steadily. He even started doing one of Scout's signature things, pressing his forehead to people's knees when they were upset. Like a silent message. "You're not alone." It happened during a visit with a new group of kids. One had just gotten bad news. His cousin had been taken back into foster care. He was sitting on the ground, silent, tears dripping onto his shoes. Timber walked over and gently touched his head to the boy's leg. Just once. Then he sat down. The boy didn't move. Then he whispered, "Thanks." Scout watched from across the room. At home that night, I lay on the floor beside them both. "You're training the next generation," I said to Scout. "You're not just a hero, you're a mentor now." He yawned like it was no big deal. That summer ended with one last surprise. A letter from a national animal rescue group. They were creating a new youth ambassador program and wanted Scout to be their first honorary member. It came with a plaque, a donation to the shelter, and a huge care package of toys and treats. Scout didn't care about the plaque, but he did love the peanut butter biscuits. The night the package came, Maddie, Timber, and I built a new shelf in our living room. We called it Scout's Shelf. On it, we placed the scrapbook, the laminated poem, the first therapy dog tag, a photo of Boomer, the Scout circle patch, and now the plaque. Scout sniffed it all, gave one short bark, then walked off to nap. He didn't need trophies, but the world needed his story, and he wasn't done giving it yet. When the storm hit, we were halfway through our visit to Willow Pines Assisted Living. It started as a low rumble while Timber was lying under the puzzle table and Scout was nestled beside Mr. Hayden's wheelchair. We were used to Scout getting a little jumpy with Thunder, but he'd grown calmer over time. Timber, though, Thunder still rattled him. Even if he didn't bolt or cry, it put something in his eyes that I recognized from Scout's early days, that flicker of not knowing whether to run or brace. The first crack came just as I was helping one of the staff bring out a tray of juice cups. The windows shook. Timber raised his head sharply and backed toward the corner. "It's okay, buddy," I said, kneeling down. "We're inside. Safe." Scout got up slowly, walked over, and sat beside him. That was all it took. Timber stayed put, still tense, still unsure, but not hiding. The power went out a minute later. The emergency lights kicked in, casting everything in a dim orange glow. A few residents gasped, some muttered about their oxygen machines, and one nurse immediately started making rounds with a flashlight. "We'll be fine," the director said as she moved past us. "We've got backup batteries. Just need to ride it out." We helped where we could. Timber followed Scout's lead, staying calm and close. One resident began to cry softly, overwhelmed by the dark and the sound of wind slamming tree branches against the windows. Scout rested his chin on her lap until her breathing steadied. The storm lasted nearly 2 hours. By the time it passed, the staff and residents were calling our dogs heroes. "Scout's like an anchor," one of the nurses said. "And Timber, he's starting to become one too." I wasn't so sure Timber would have appreciated being compared to an anchor. But later, as we were walking through the now calm parking lot, he surprised me. A car backfired 2 spaces over. Scout didn't even flinch. Timber stiffened, but then he looked at Scout, let out a breath, and kept walking. No panic, no freezing. Just walking. That night, I wrote it down in my journal. Day 519. Thunderstorm visit. Timber stood his ground. The following week brought another kind of shake-up. The city reached out. They were launching a new initiative in partnership with shelters, schools, and local therapy programs. They wanted us, Scout, Timber, and me, to help design a curriculum. "We're calling it PAWS," the program director said over the phone. Positive actions with support, for students who struggle in school or with behavior. A chance for them to connect, build empathy, learn from animals who've come through hard things. It was a lot. More than anything we'd done before. But we said yes. The pilot program began with a single classroom. 10 kids, ages 9 to 12. Each one had some sort of behavioral or emotional challenge. Some barely spoke. Others talked non-stop, but couldn't focus. Most were somewhere in between. The school cleared out a small reading room and filled it with floor pillows, bean bags, and a few tables. Scout and Timber got their own corner, complete with mats, bowls, and a shelf filled with treats. Our first session was quiet. The kids didn't know what to make of us. One boy stayed near the door. A girl in a hoodie sat cross-legged with her back to the wall. I didn't force anything. I introduced Scout and Timber, explained their stories, then read from one of Maddie's short Scout books. Scout used to be afraid of everything, I read. But one boy believed in him, and slowly, Scout began to believe in himself. No one said much, but by the end of the hour, 2 kids had pet Timber. One had drawn a picture of Scout wearing a cape. By week 3, they were talking. Not all the time, not perfectly, but they were asking questions. Watching. Listening. One boy, Jordan, said, "So Scout had it worse than me, and he still made it?" I nodded. "That means I could too," he said quietly. We started giving them journals. Simple ones. Nothing fancy. I called them Scout logs. The kids wrote down feelings, drew pictures, even pasted in fur from Scout's brush sessions. Timber still kept a bit of distance at first. He'd stay close to Scout, but watch from the edges. Then something unexpected happened. A girl named Maya had a meltdown during a group game. She kicked over a chair and curled up under the table. The staff moved to step in, but I held up a hand. Timber walked over. Not quickly, not dramatically, just a slow, thoughtful walk. He ducked under the table and sat beside her. She didn't speak, didn't touch him, but she stopped crying. Slowly sat up, reached out and touched his back. Later, she said, "I don't like people when I'm mad, but Timber wasn't trying to fix me. He was just there." That went into the log. Day 541. Timber gave space, and it worked. Meanwhile, Maddie started a project of her own. With Mom's help, she created a printable activity packet for shelters to give out to kids. It had coloring pages of Scout and Timber, word searches, questions like, "How can you be kind to a scared dog?" We sent it to 10 shelters. Within a month, 30 more requested copies. Linda had to start printing them in batches just to keep up. One evening, after a therapy visit and 2 Zoom calls about the PAWS program, I sat on the back porch with Scout and Timber and just stared at the stars. "You two have no idea how many people you're helping," I said. Timber licked my elbow. Scout put his paw on my foot. Then they both sighed like dads watching a Little League game. That weekend, we went on a hiking trip as a family. First one since Boomer passed. We drove to a park with soft trails and a lake surrounded by pine trees. Scout had more white in his muzzle now. He moved slower, took longer naps. But on that trail, he walked steady, tail swaying, ears up. Timber bounced like a rabbit for the first half-mile, then wore himself out and trotted beside me. We stopped for lunch near the lake. Maddie threw tiny pieces of sandwich crust to a brave squirrel. Scout ignored it. Timber growled softly once, then let it go. As we packed up, a man passing by with his own dog recognized us. "Wait, are you the Scout team?" He knelt beside Scout. "My daughter watched your video when she was in the hospital. She asked for a dog like Scout when she got out. He's not quite as calm," he said, chuckling, "but he's getting there." Back home, we added another item to Scout's shelf, a framed drawing from that man's daughter. It showed Scout and Timber sitting in a rocket ship labeled Hope. I wrote in the log, Day 552. The story keeps spreading. One morning, the shelter called with a new challenge. They'd taken in 4 puppies, barely weaned, skittish, possibly born under a porch, and never handled. They needed to learn to trust. Fast. A foster had fallen through, and they were hoping we could help. We'd never handled puppies before, not like this. But Scout had. We took them in. 4 tiny furballs, no names, no confidence, all ears and paws. Timber didn't know what to make of them. He paced the first night, unsure whether to bark or run. Scout just lay in the center of the room while they sniffed and stumbled around him. By day 3, one had fallen asleep on his tail. By day 5, Timber was trying to teach them fetch. They weren't ready for public visits, of course, but they were learning, watching, absorbing. And I realized something. The healing Scout had started. It was turning into something bigger than any of us. A chain reaction. One dog helping another, one child finding their voice, one act of quiet, steady presence rippling outward. And Scout was still the center of it all. Not with barking or tricks or flashy moments, just by showing up. Every single day. I started to notice it during our morning walks. Scout would lag behind just a little more each day, his tail wagging but lower, his steps slower. At first I thought it was the heat, or maybe just age catching up with him. He'd still rise to his feet when I grabbed the leash, still follow me out the door, but he moved like someone walking through water. By the time September rolled in, Scout didn't want to go as far. He'd make it to the end of the block, then stop, sit, and look back at the house. I never pushed him. We'd turn around, and Timber would trot ahead while Scout followed behind, steady but tired. Dr. Weiss did all the tests. Nothing jumped out. No tumors, no obvious illness. But her voice was soft when she said it. He's getting older. His body's slowing down. Some dogs hit that point quietly. We made adjustments. Shorter visits, more rest, soft food. He seemed comfortable, just slower. One evening, Scout didn't get up when Timber ran to the door. He lifted his head, blinked at me, and rested it back down. Timber paced until I opened the door to show him it was just the mail truck. That night, Scout didn't follow me upstairs. He stayed curled on his bed by the fireplace. I sat beside him, ran my hand through his fur, and he leaned into me gently. We still went to the youth center once a week. Scout didn't do the full session anymore, just 20 minutes or so. But the kids still waited for him. They brought him little toys, treats, handmade bandanas. One said, "You're the calm in my storm." Timber took over more of the active stuff. He'd walk with the kids, sit with them during journal time, nudge their hands when they cried. And always, always, Scout was nearby, watching, listening. Maya, the girl who'd once crawled under the table, made a painting of both dogs. Scout had wings. Timber stood beside him like a student in graduation robes. "Why wings?" I asked. She shrugged. "Because he's already kind of part angel." It was just a picture. But I kept it. That October, we had our last big event. PAWS officially launched statewide. The kickoff was at the city auditorium, and they asked me to speak. I brought both dogs, of course. Scout wore his vest, even though he didn't walk on stage. He stayed behind the curtain, lying comfortably on a folded blanket, while Timber sat beside me. I told the audience how it all began, with a scared dog in a shelter cage and a kid who didn't know what he was doing, just that he wanted to help. "I didn't fix Scout," I said. "He chose to trust again. I just stayed long enough for him to try." People stood when I finished. Some wiped their eyes. One woman whispered, "Thank you," as I stepped off stage. Backstage, I knelt beside Scout and whispered it back. A few days later, he didn't eat breakfast, just looked at it and turned his head. I sat down beside him, the way I used to when he first came home. I told him about school, about Timber's latest sock theft, about Maddie's project on endangered frogs. He closed his eyes. That night, we made a space for him in the backyard, his favorite spot near the garden fence, where he used to nap in the sun. Dr. Weiss came to the house. We were all there. Timber lay beside him, quiet and still. Maddie held his paw. I whispered the same words I had the first time I met him. "If you bite me, that's okay, but you're not staying in this cage forever." And he hadn't. He'd built a world. We buried him with his first vest, his favorite toy, and a copy of the photo Maddie had drawn, the one where he had wings. The house felt different after. Not empty, just quieter. Timber changed, too. For a few days, he was restless, pacing from room to room. Then, slowly, he settled. Picked up Scout's habits, sitting near the back door at sunset, resting his chin on someone's knee when they were upset, waiting. He wasn't Scout. He was Timber. But the imprint was there. I kept up the visits. Timber came alone now, but he carried Scout with him. Kids still asked about the older dog with the soft eyes. I brought stories, drawings, the patch from Scout's vest. They added it to the wall in the center's reading room. At the shelter, Linda created a new wall, the legacy wall. Scout's photo was the first. Not in gold, not flashy, just him, sitting calmly, watching. And people kept coming. Letters, emails, drawings, stories. One girl started her own shelter club at her school. A boy in Iowa ran a sock drive in Timber's name. A teacher in New York named their classroom quiet corner Scout's Spot. The story kept moving, even after he was gone. Maddie wrote a final book, Scout's Circle, The Dog Who Sat Beside You. It wasn't about tricks or training or grand adventures. It was about stillness, about presence, about how a dog nobody wanted became the reason hundreds of others got a second chance. I published it online. The first copy went on the shelf beside Scout's plaque. We held a community day that spring. Not a memorial, a celebration. Kids read from their Scout logs. Timber sat like a king while toddlers hugged him. There were no tears, just stories. Laughter, wagging tails. I spoke last. Scout didn't change the world because he barked the loudest, I said. He changed it because he stayed, because when everything was quiet, he was still there, ready, listening. The crowd clapped. Timber barked once, like a quiet echo. That night, I sat at the garden fence. Timber lay beside me. The stars were out. I whispered, "We're still here, still listening." And I swear for just a second I felt Scout's presence, quiet, strong, steady, still sitting beside us, just like always.